What would have been the highlight, in your opinion, of your political career? And if you had the opportunity to go back and make one change, what would that be?
Well, it's difficult to find a highlight because, you had so many successes. But I think the greatest impact for me was in 2007.
Hi, everybody. We want to welcome you to another episode of the Butler Legacy Podcast. I'm so excited to have again my dear cousin Loretta Butler joining me for this session. Loretta, I think we're up for a treat. Another treat.
We always have a treat, Franklyn. It's just amazing. Obviously, we'll have to say who we have today, but it is always exciting to come here and do this because the encouragement, we've just come off some huge independence celebrations.
Absolutely.
And we wanted to get this podcast going before the 50th. And so many persons have accosted us and stopped us and encouraged us of the stories we're sharing. And so I'm happy again today. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta. And to our guests, thank you for welcoming us in your homes, in your cars, on your exercise routines as you listen to this podcast. We're here to educate and inspire, to tell the story of the Butler legacy. And we hope to encourage other families who have legacies to continue to tell their stories. We believe that the country will only get better if people know from whence we've come so that we can chart where we're going. And so we're delighted.
Always. Absolutely.
Have
always.
a very special guest with us today.
And I have the distinct honor of first saying I thank Baha Mar so much for being our primary sponsor.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Being here in this wonderful environment of the Echo Gallery. It's really a beautiful space, and we thank them. And of course, we thank the Butler Legacy Foundation for also being our sponsors. But, just to get right on into this, because I think that I talk a lot, but I think I've met my match today.
I think you're pretty right. I think you have met your match today. And you ain't talking about me either.
And I'm not talking about you, even though I know that we can both together expound and carry on extensively. But, it is really an honor today to have a person of the stature that we have as a guest today. And very seriously, a gentleman who in his very young age had challenges, but who we have come to understand was really one of those young strategists that helped to capitulate the Bahamas into the status of independence. I'm speaking of none other than our third Bahamian Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, who always has a lot to share. As I said, he was the third Bahamian Prime Minister to serve in an independent country. He's probably the second longest serving parliamentarian thus far in our history, having served for over 40 years. I think at the time that he was appointed as a senator by Prime Minister Sir Lynden Pindling, he would have been the youngest senator at that time. He's an amazing father, very dedicated.
Absolutely.
And he's also a very wonderful husband of one of the most beautiful women in the Bahamas.
In the country.
I don't know how he captured her, but anyway, that's from the Valley. None other than his exceptional wife, Mrs. Bernadette Christie, who holds many, many caps. She is an attorney, she is an accountant, she is a mother, she's an entrepreneur. She's just everything, and I'm sure she's the wind beneath his wings. So without further ado, as much as I want to talk about this outstanding citizen, this nation builder, this agitator, I'm excited. He was also my adversary, but I told him I think we made a lot of drama in the House of Assembly. But I love him dearly. None other than the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, who's an icon in his own right.
Absolutely. Welcome, Mr. Christie.
Well,
it's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, and everything Loretta said, I agree with. She said some nice things about me. That's a wonderful change from what we used to be when we were adversaries in Parliament. She spoke well about my wife, and my wife, you could never say enough about her because she's absolutely brilliant. And she continues now to do part-time construction. So, helping her sister build a house. She built a house for her mother next door that she gave to our son. Yep. So Bernadette is a very talented and gifted lady.
No, you're very, and we must always talk about, the families.
Absolutely.
And the women, the matriarchs that, helped to build us up. I think that well, obviously, I remember everyone saying how you had such a fabulous wedding because of your bride, and you were pretty dashing yourself, I understand.
Well, let me just say this to you. The only public figure, notwithstanding all of the invitations that came to my wedding, was your grandfather.
Aww.
Sir Milo Bolton Butler, as Governor General. He sat in the front seat of St. Agnes. My wife told me this morning that his driver, when she arrived at the church, it was raining hard, and the driver came out with an umbrella and put the umbrella over her to walk her into the church. So, connections.
And memories.
And settlement and
absolute
memories. Yes.
Memories.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say it is really our honor to be in your presence today.
Yeah.
And since both you and I decided we're going to be more nation builders than political adversaries, we also have to realize that, despite all of that, whatever we did was because of love of this beautiful country, the Bahamas. We've just celebrated 50 years. You were a huge part of those 50 years that made a difference. And we want to talk to you about that today. Also about our involvement and your involvement with our grandfather, Sir Milo.
Well, and talking about him, I can tell you, I was trying to work out with my wife this morning as we were having breakfast. Why did I go to Sir Milo's house as a bachelor and take her with me in the pond?
Yeah.
And I said, obviously he had invited me. We went upstairs and met him, and he began the conversation saying, now, young man, I brought you up here to tell you, you're getting married. I'm going to talk to you about the responsibility of marriage, the responsibility of leading a family, but the man must always wear the trousers in the house. The man must wear the pants in the house. So my wife said, I must not have heard that because I would have fired back at him.
I love that. I love that.
But it was fascinating that he played that kind of role in my life. Yeah. And as I thought about it, I realized also that my father was a pondite. My father lived on the jib in the pond.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Well, first of all, let's identify where the jib is, because I'm not even sure that Franklyn knows what the jib. You know what the jib is?
I don't. Please tell me.
The jib is where you now have that restaurant. Whatever it's called, right opposite the Family Guardian building. When you turn onto Ernest Street off East Bay Street, opposite the Betty Cole Park, that is the jib.
I got you.
There was a lady called May Morton who was his aunt or relative, and who eventually moved down from the jib. But my dad grew up there as a neighbor to the Butlers.
I didn't know that.
Okay, and it's interesting. The young men of the East, in particular, formed a band called the Chocolate Dandies. Okay, a very famous orchestra-type band. And my dad was a banjo player in that band. George Simonet was there. George Moxie was there. A man named Ike Strawn from Kemp Road. Neville Stewart, I think it was Stewart. He played the violin in Dowdesville Street.
They were talented, weren't they?
So, but listen, extraordinary men.
Wow.
Okay, who came together, and a lot of them named musicians who went on to have a career. And my dad eventually left, and he said when the war came on, many of them sold their instruments to donate to the war. I couldn't understand that at all.
Yeah, I
but that's how it happened, and but you could imagine in those days, they used to get up early in the morning to practice. He said, and they had to walk to a place to practice, and he said many times they had to practice in a hall that was down on Shirley Street, called the Aurora Hall, he said they'd go there early in the morning, practice, go back home, and then go to work.
Was that the Aurora Lodge Hall?
Yes.
That's right, because the lodges and their halls were great place for communities.
But the effort they were making to be something, and when you think of it, look, it is wonderful for me to have this opportunity to talk to you, because you can't imagine what the Butlers would be in the history of this country because of your grandfather. Look, he would have come at a time, 1905 or 6 when he was born.
That's right, 1906.
Look, the slave trade was abolished in 1868.
Right.
So that was just 30-something years just before he was born.
Yep.
Slavery was abolished in 1834. So that's like 74 years before he was born. And therefore, the colony that he was born in was clearly trying to get used to slaves being free.
Yeah.
And people of color who might have been freed slaves, okay, being acceptable. And how he could have summoned, I guess, God. It has to be God. What would make a man become a symbol of defiance? What would make a man become so strong at a time when the opposition was clearly not prepared to accept you as being a man?
Yeah.
And you were a boy, you don't care who you were. And not only did your grandfather make himself into that, because it was important, I believe, for Bahamians, well, call them Bahamians, the people who lived in the colony at the time,
Right.
to have somebody who was strong, because, you want to be around someone who's strong, to give you the encouragement, to give you the hope that one day, because you're always living for that one day.
Yep.
I
when it
always
happened.
envisioned him as being a big and strong person. Actually, as a grandparent, as youngsters, we feared the authority of the older ones. But I want to ask you if we can segue into this, because obviously you have had great interactions from being descendants of the eastern area and also another historical area where your parents made their residence in the valley. Did you always envision yourself being in public life? Or just tell us how that evolved.
Loretta, this is why I think it's important to understand the role that some people played in our country, in our history. A few days ago, I spoke at an independence party in Haiti at our embassy, and I told the Haitian Bahamians and Haitians who were there that the first man of color to serve in our parliament was a man by the name of Stephen Dillard.
That is correct.
And that his mother was a Haitian lady by the name of Hester Argo, who put him on a boat in 1804 with two of her other sons. He became the first member of parliament. When he tried to become the member of parliament after being elected, they refused to allow him to sit. They had another election. He won that.
Wow.
Okay, by profession, he was a tailor. Another brother was a Loretta. He became a member of parliament. He was a jeweler by profession. But now, these were people who came, young boys who came from Haiti, made themselves into Bahamians and contributing.
Interesting.
But this is what your grandfather would have met in place. Stephen Dillard, they refused to let him sit, so he had to go all over again and fight. His son became a high court judge. They never would allow him to be confirmed. So eventually he had to leave the colony and go elsewhere.
That's right.
You see, so
correct.
so you have this situation where in the Bahamas that we have to get used to the idea as to who did what and when.
Absolutely.
And so the people who stood firm in history and who stood strong were sending messages all along the line to people like myself who one day would become something.
Yeah.
And so I was looking as I grew up for symbols. Who could I be like? Because look, when I was growing up, the people of color could not live beyond Madeira, the top of Madeira Street, right? We were segmented into areas. I would go to the Nassau Theater in Elizabeth Avenue. I would go to the Cinema Theater on East Street, the Capitol Theater on Market Street, but I couldn't go to Savoy Theater.
And why is that? I just want to make sure everybody
because only white
my
people,
age understand that.
White people were allowed to go to it. So I was growing up at a time when I would say to my friends, the only white people's home I ever went into as a young adult and going into was the sons of a Ministry of Works director who had come out from England.
Okay.
And his sons decided, and right to the very end, they stayed here. I had the privilege of helping Malcolm, one of the sons, get his citizenship.
Okay.
But it was difficult in those days, and the way, and that is why, in my lifetime I saw it, I sensed it, and so all of us who were aspiring to become professionals, aspire to get an education, all of us had this view that one day, one of us or some of us will get together and bring the change about. When I went to England in 1963, Dr. Nottish B.J. was going to medical school. Mm-hmm. I was going to finish A-levels and O-levels because of my, difficulties in the past. And I remember turning to him in Shepherd's Bush, England. Yeah. I said, B.J., let's go home. Let's get together with students who are coming home for the summer, and let's form an organization that will bring and advocate change, challenge the authorities. And we did that. And we came home, got together with Franklyn and all of those. Sean was then perhaps a little bit too young for that. Sean eventually became one of the defining members of UNICOL because they took UNICOL, University College students, and made it UNICOM, meaning University Community. Okay? And they took it to new levels, and it really became a major agitation force for the Progressive Liberal Party.
There were two things, though, that you mentioned. Well, first of all, both you and Sean McQueenie share, similarities because of his defiance, he was kicked out of Queen's College. Yeah. So he didn't have the opportunity, as he shared with us recently, to actually go off to London to do his law degree. And so what the call part that evolved to community, I guess that involved persons like him, because he would not have been in college. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, what you did not touch on, in my opinion, sufficiently is your name, your last name, Christie, and the slavery and the changes. We know as well, just looking at your hue as an individual, knowing your background, your father, your mother, and their hue, there was integration. This Christie may be a few shades darker, but we know that whole thing is back to the other Christies that go as the oligarchs, if you will, of the day. So, when you talk about the color definition and the difficulties of black people coming out of slavery, a part of the story we must always capture, though, is that even though these people would have been maybe slave owners or, persons just coming out of the precipice of slavery ownership, there is the cross between the black and white, where a Perry Christie is related to the H.G. Christies and all of the other Christies of the lighter hue. Am I correct?
And I think one of the great tragedies is that too many of us who are so connected have not lived that way. One of my uncles, Brentford, was the top man in North Andrews for William Macpherson Christie as a representative from the House of Assembly. Brentford has family, sons living, one of whom is a partner in McKinney Bancroft.
That's right.
But he was the key man, and I'm sure he and Macpherson treated each other as family. And when I became a professional, William and his wife, we were really good friends, and the way we spoke and talked to each other, Rosemary and William. And so, look, you are right in terms of the connection, but I mean, look at your own family. As much as your grandfather was a fighter, by reputation, he and Sir Asa Pritchard, all right, whatever their antagonisms and differences were, respected each other, almost to the point where I used to tease your Uncle Asa, that he was named after Asa Pritchard, okay? And so look at this now. You're talking about a Milo Bolton Butler, right, who despised everything that was wrong with oppression and discrimination and whatnot, but who understood that for there to be progress, you have to have relationships
Absolutely.
that respected each other.
Absolutely.
And so it's amazing when you try to understand how you could split yourself in such a way. Walk into the Royal Bank of Canada with a boom in your hand, saying, I want change in this bank. And then at the same time, go to the next office and sit down and smile with someone.
But is it not important then, Mr. Christie? You've led this country. You know the dynamics of the social demographics, the economic challenges that we've had. You talked initially of Stephen Dillette and Mr. Loretta, who came from Haiti. You look at our country today and how split are we with our Haitian brothers and sisters. You look at us today and how split are we with our white counterparts who are Bahamians. But yet, we talk about building a stronger Bahamas over the next 50 years. What is it? These are the stories we're sharing. Is it not important for our history for us to understand that we all share a common blood?
I think you said it. It is important for us to work together. I mean, the ethos of a country really is the ethos of all.
Absolutely.
A characteristic spirit really that binds us together as Bahamians. And so look at the West Indians who came in droves to be prison officers,
That's right.
police officers, civil
teachers,
servants,
civil
and
servants.
They are integrated into society, by names. They help to bring about change in our country in a meaningful way because, Jamaica and Trinidad went independence long before us. They went in 62, Jamaica, and at the time we were marching towards majority rule in 67. And so you can see, therefore, that when they came in, they helped to sort of firm up what was happening in the country. And therefore, when one looks at the Bahamas, you have to take into consideration the question, what is the Bahamas and what has made up the Bahamas?
What is Bahamian?
Who makes it? And what is Bahamian?
Yeah.
And so clearly we are a great mix of people. Now, with respect to the past versus the future, when the PLP won in 1967, sociologists said that the greatest movement from the working class to the middle class took place as a result of the change that took place, right? So the anticipation and the expectation of the whole professional class of Bahamians was a great release took place when the PLP won. And interestingly enough, they won at a time where they had to make, decisions and form a coalition government, so to speak, with A.R. Brennan becoming the speaker and Randall Fox becoming a minister in that government. So it was a good start. And by, of course, the following year, as a result of the general election that took place, then there was an explosion in support of the PLP. Now, look, I think we have to give credit to those of that generation because it was a peaceful revolution.
Absolutely.
No question about
Okay?
it.
No matter what the antipathies were, that there was a transition that did not, you had people leave because they were scared as what's going to happen, but many of them came back, okay? Because what happened was that after the initial movement on that, the PLP coming to power, winning in 1968, the country accepted that change had taken place. And you could see the movements of people like Godfrey Kelly and Jeff Johnstone and Peter Graham, okay, in their respective professional ways, and how they were able to conform with the new modality that existed in the country. And so, look, I remember, Loretta went, I'd met Tippy Lightburn late in life. And I know I was a part of McKinney, Barcroft and Hughes firm with Hubert Ingram before we formed our own firm. And Dick Lightburn, a relative, was a partner in that firm. I remember when Tippy was sick, I just, out of the blue, decided, he's a major contributor to our country. Let me go and ask if I could come to see him. And I went up twice to his home and sat at his home on the Eastern Road and had a really wonderful series of discussions with him about life, about what it used to be like, and so forth and so on. And it made me come to appreciate that no matter what was said, no matter how bitter the divisions, you have to concede that these the people who constituted the UBP at the time, or UBP supporters and business, that they knew the Bahamas and they loved the Bahamas.
Yeah.
You see, that generation, and they knew it and they loved it and they made sure they enjoyed it, and they had resources to help them enjoy it, like moving around on boats and so forth. So, but it was a wonderful example, I think. Okay,
And that was a nice
of a
initiative by yourself to actually do that.
Wonderful example,
Yeah.
you
So,
know,
Mr.
and so, yeah.
Talk me through. You're a young fellow now. Unicall. How you become a senator? What was your relationship like with Sir Lyndon and Sir Milo, these fellows who are at the front of this transformation?
Well, listen, whenever they came to London on constitutional matters and trying to bring change, I would be a student. And sometimes when L.B. Johnson, when they came up, I was one of those persons who would find out that they were there, and I would go and see them when I go with a big enough case so I could carry a tote, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so if they said, you like a drink? Without them knowing, I'd order a bottle to carry with me, you see, and put my bottle in my briefcase and so forth. So it was really beginnings where they were advocating for change. Very interestingly enough, when Cecil Wallace Richfield went to school at Hull University, and I aspired to be a lawyer, one day my dad took me to the courts, and Orville Tinkhurst was prosecuting and Paul Adley was defending on a murder case, and it was the first time I saw combatants in the court.
Right.
And it just happened to be two of the very top you'd want to see. And so that firmed up my dreams and aspirations of being a lawyer.
Okay.
So I wrote Cecil asking him if he could help me. Okay, and so all of these little things are coming together and so forth and so on. And, you know, Ed Moxie coming into the valley, okay, and saying, listen, young fella, you like politics, come go with me. Ruzi Cadet, who's from the Pawn,
Absolutely.
building a house in the valley, and Ruzi Cadet saying, the people are scared to hold the polls for the PLP, so I'm going to take a couple of you fellas who can't vote with me to hold the polls. And so I went, you know, so you had situations like that, and so my being around them helped to shape my aspirations, right, and whatnot. And then, you know, Milo and Matthew Butler, we were in London together.
Absolutely.
Matthew used to come to an apartment shared by me and Tony McKinney, a lawyer here. So we became good friends, okay, and whatnot. And then when I came home as a result of Sir Lyndon sending for me.
Okay.
The 72 elections were coming up. He had George Smith call me. They had something called Diversified Services at the time, a company called Diversified Services at Basil Nichols, George Smith, and a man by the name of Dave Probinski. And they sent me a ticket saying I must pick up a ticket. I flew and asked for a free ticket. And then they took me up to his house, Sir Lyndon's house, and Sir Lyndon said, I'd like you to run in Eleuthera.
In Eleuthera.
Okay?
That's where his mother is from.
I didn't know.
I finished the bar. So I said, Eleuthera? Now? So I then went home to talk to my mom. My mom said, well, listen, you don't know Butler and Bethel? He used to teach you in Sunday school. I said, yes.
Yeah.
He said, he has a brother, Philip Bethel.
Yeah.
Listen, this. So I went back to Sir Lyndon, Simbo, Bo, Simeon, Bo, George Smith, all those up on the village, Soldier Road, his home on Soldier Road. I said, listen, I'm going to come home to campaign, but I want to work in London for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I said, believe it or not, although Tinkhurst, who was then in opposition, got me into a law firm called Lovell, White and King in London. Okay? He himself had done it. Okay? And I said, and Orwell had even offered me a real job, you know, and so forth. But Paul Bethel, who was the managing partner of McKinney, Barker and Hughes, was a family friend of my mother's family, the Allens and the Careys and McCartney's, and, you know, and so Paul Bethel had a grip on me. Okay? Family grip.
I want you to come back to that, but continue.
But listen now, and only Hubert Ingram could come to me at his audacity. Okay? I mean, he was audacious enough to say to me, Christie, let's leave here, because he was articled there. And let me just, you're talking about segues, let me just say this. Sean McCreaney is a perfect example of how a man could be absolutely brilliant in writing, brilliant in law, a tremendous graft, one of the top lawyers in the country in the law of trust, and not go to university.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
That's
that is the story of Hubert Ingram and Brave Davis.
Wow.
Neither of them had the opportunity
To go
through lack of funding and financing to go to university. Both of them became brilliant lawyers, and I'm saying this even with respect to Hubert in terms of the complexity of the cases he dealt with as my partner. And Brave was appeared in the Brave Davis, our Prime Minister, appeared in the highest courts in the Privy Council, arguing the Privy Council. So, but it is an extraordinary statement of the Bahamas.
Right.
Okay, that these people who were born in the most humble of circumstances, like Hubert Ingram and Brave Davis, both of whom became prime ministers, was able to ascend to the top political office in the land and to be capable of being seen to be in charge and to run effectively, to run the offices of prime minister effectively and efficiently. So it's a wonderful country when we look at it, with a wonderful history of how, you can be an exemplar
Yep.
for so many thousands of Bahamians who sometimes are overcome by the intimidation, of circumstances. I can't do this, they would say. And I use the example saying, listen, man, somebody decided when I was 14 years old to say that I couldn't learn.
Right.
I should go back, and get a trade. And Donald Davis told my parents, no, something went wrong with that boy, send him back to me.
Yes.
And he then put me with some teachers,
Right.
who I would never ever forget, and Gwen Hall, for example. I was shocked one day when I saw, when I had finished university and all that, Gwen Hall was a big F&M and so forth, but she was a wonderful teacher who nurtured me.
Yeah.
Hilda Barrett, so a wonderful teacher, Hilda Barrett, who nurtured me. She was in Donaldson and cadet, I mean, again, these are people who I think made the difference in me, made me believe that I could be something. I went and took a lot of BJCs. I then went to night school, and when I passed, I think I was the best student in night school in terms of
Congratulations.
GCE passes. The then headmaster, H.M. Davis, asked to see me, and he came to see me. I went to see him, at Government High, and he offered me a place back in Government High, saying that whoever put you out made a mistake.
Yeah.
And
So what
that,
message, Mr. Christie, would you give to, the teenager, young, 20-year-old who is confused, had a rough life growing up, doesn't really know whether they have the ability, because, you go through these circumstances, somebody tell you you have a learning disability, you feel like, listen, you aren't going to amount to anything. What's the message to the young person who are watching this podcast?
The message is, let me congratulate you and Loretta for this kind of program. You see, because people who are wonderful example setters, who we call exemplars, people who set an example, who like your mommy could say, I want you to be like him.
Right.
Now, my mommy always say, why don't you be like David? David Allen was he was my first cousin.
Yes.
We were born on the same day, all right, but half an hour apart. But he was always a Christian fella. And I said, Mommy, I got to be a sinner. I got to, let me do it. I go to Sunday school and I know all the Bible and all that sort of stuff. But I grew up with that kind of stuff, right? Well, why don't you be like David? Well, life is about that, being able to look for examples. So you look for examples of people who have the discipline, who have the understanding of life, and then you say it's never too late to begin.
Yeah.
Okay? Look at me. When I went to university, I was 3 years older than the average student at university. When B.J. Nottage and David Allen, my cousin, and Eddie Bailey, and all these people who went to university, all right, started university, I had to go back to do A-levels and get them. So you never give up.
Yeah.
But importantly, teachers shouldn't give up on children, and parents shouldn't give up on children.
Yeah.
And so when you ask about that, the country has to find a way to lift up what you're doing now, people who can tell a story and tell a story effectively, so that those who may hear it could say, why couldn't I do that?
Yeah.
Why couldn't I be like that? You know what it was to know that your father cried before you for the first time when you got put out.
Yeah.
I'm still emotional about that because that put a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
When you had to walk back into a situation where the children in the morning assembly at Eastern Senior School say he got put out.
Yeah.
The shame that you
Yes.
had to carry and you watch your parents carry. So that put a chip on me. I decided, we formed the Valley Boys. I was going to be the best dancer in the Valley Boys. Okay? Because
Barry
I had to prove
Shuffle.
myself. Yes, I had to prove myself. I went into athletics.
Yeah.
I used to train 5 o'clock every morning. I built a jumping pit in my yard. I became the first Bahamian to win a medal in field events and the second Bahamian to win a medal in an international competition.
I see.
Next to Tommy Robinson. Nobody knows them kind of things.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, that's because I was driving myself to make up for all the problems I was to my family.
Yeah.
And so you have to have some kind of drive in yourself to say, I'm going to do better. And the country has to find a way to keep on reaching down to people and communicating them. Don't give up. Don't give in. You can do better. You can do more.
Yeah.
And finding a way to help them.
I love that story, and there was so much that I wanted to come back to, but I think one of the things when we talk about the legacy of Sir Milo, and I listened to Prime Minister talk about his challenges, it's not where you start.
Yeah.
It's also not what you accomplish in terms of academics.
Absolutely.
That propels you to the top. As we know, our grandfather never even finished,
Formal education.
formal education. So he didn't have the opportunity to have a high school diploma.
That's correct.
You look at the great achievements of Sean McQueenie, who, as Mr. Christie just articulated, really is probably one of our most brilliant minds, but did not have the opportunity to go off to university. Mm-hmm. You look at Mr. Christie himself, who had a huge setback in, basically people saying, hey man, you too dumb, you can't learn. Yeah. And to take that chip and to use that determination to propel himself to where he is. I think the underlying theme, the thread that binds these fibers together are definitely the stories of the underdogs.
No question.
But let me just say something too that you almost took me away from. You know what it is for me growing up to look at the Butler boys on the back of a truck, driving on Montrose Avenue, shouting, Iceman, Iceman, selling ice.
Yeah.
And when I looked into it, and I went back and checked with Godfrey Enius, who was one of the neighbors of the Butlers and the Pond,
who considers himself part of the family, by
no
the way.
Question about it. No question about it. No question about it. And I just talked to him last night about this, But he was saying, the fella, they used to get up early in the morning, go to the ice house, get the ice, and still make some deliveries of ice. And I'm saying to myself, the work ethic that was imposed upon them by Sir Milo was clearly, he was reflecting his own upbringing. Yeah. Where I'm told that his father died, leaving him his only son and four sisters, and therefore he had to grow up very quickly and work as a man when he was still a boy.
That's right.
Okay? But again, there's some elements in there that you learn from. And he transferred that and took that with him into his children. And he had a lot of them. But the one thing I guess he was not going to compromise on was they had to understand that nothing comes easy. And you had to work hard to make it happen. And your grandmother, all right? I remember her as a young boy. They had a shop in East Street. Eliza Malcolm. Yeah. Okay, and running from, and I believe your daddy used to be in there with her.
All of the children had to work in the...
I remember particularly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's when I started getting to know Frank. But much more. Listen, you talk about Pinling. Pinling gave me the first appointment very early. Right. Made me a member of the board of directors of the Broadcasting Corporation. And who was my chairman? Milo Jr.
Oh.
Okay, so Milo Jr. and I developed a relationship where he was the chairman and we had some outstanding men on the board at the time, and we watched him. And it was a time when Milo led us into sending Charles Carter to school, Kelsey Johnson to school, at Bethel to school.
I see.
He was preparing ZNS for television.
Wow.
Okay, so again, butlers, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, and I had another. So Lyndon made me a senator when Ali Butler, Sarlington Butler, who was a friend of mine, a lifetime friend of mine, had his challenges with the PLP. Okay, Hubert Ingham was chairman, and a lot of people decided and got, tossed, really, so to speak, and changes took place, and I was one of them that went into the Senate in 1974. So when I look back at my time in public life, I'm there. If you add my years in the House of Assembly and my years in the Senate, I'm ranking in terms of one of the oldest serving members ever in the history of the country.
In the Commonwealth as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
But that is so interesting. Longevity in politics today is elusive.
Yeah, exactly.
To say the least. I'm very glad when I look at my sister Glenys Hannah Martin, who's making a strive, not just as, getting up there in terms of being one of the long-standing MPs, but also as a female. Yeah. But you, Prime Minister Christie, even when people doubted you, you continued to be successful, whether, in being reelected. What is the recipe, if you will, for your success?
And you would know this as well as I do, that you have to have an appreciation of people. I always say to young members of Parliament, people must like you. And the only way they could like you, they must get to know you. Yeah. And the only way they get to know you, you must allow them to access you. You must allow them to be able to talk to you. You must find a way for them to see you and know your goodness. And then they will allow for the challenges that you face. They will come to understand that you can't do everything for everybody at the same time. Mm-hmm. But unless you create that nexus, that relationship with them, you're going to have a problem. And the country now has a situation. I remember Ingram and I took the former Prime Minister to lunch from Jamaica, who was the observer, Bruce Golding. He was the observer, led the observer team in the last election here in the Bahamas when Minnis lost and Brave Davis won. And he said that a very dangerous culture is developing in the Bahamas that we should be concerned about. And that is a culture of changing every 5 years and not giving a government time to do work over a period of time. And so if you notice in the last 25 years, that's one quarter of the century, there have been change every election, okay? And so the last time there wasn't when England won in 97, okay? But from that year forward, the elections held, change took place. And the question is why and how do you break it? Because most governments need more than 5 years to implement their programs.
Well, I like what you said about being known by your constituents, being known by your contemporaries, being known by your party.
Yes.
You must build that type of bond. But, I think, and I want you to speak to this, a part of the challenges we also have, I think, and what I've observed, is the management of expectations.
Yep.
And it appears that, if you're genuine, if you're sincere, if you tell people in advance, listen, I could do this or I can't do that, they still believe the pie in the sky stories. Oh, I promise you the moon, I promise you the stars, the sun. And so they go for that because everybody wants this instant gratification. And I'm thinking, when you try to be realistic, people don't want that. And so this is why we get this dangerous precedent of constantly changing. How do we speak to our persons who represent us today, for them to understand that if they want longevity, if they want to be reelected, if they want to be a second-term government, what is it they need to do?
Or a member of Parliament, for that matter.
Well, firstly, to know that rumors multiply very quickly in terms of impact.
And truth was.
And that someone could start off saying, I tried to get this minister on a telephone, and he wouldn't answer my telephone calls. I could speak to him or her, this member of parliament, all through the election period, prior to the election. But as soon as the election, they change. That becomes a very dangerous situation where word of mouth, sip, 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 it firms up.
Yep.
And not just word of mouth now.
Okay.
I mean, this whole social media thing
social media
is dangerous.
The telephone, the modern communication. Now, you could sit in an hour and have a chat with anybody anywhere in the world. So we have a problem, but it's true of every country in the world now. I mean, and you're going to watch the United States go through a general election, and you're going to be astounded to see how people think. Right. And regardless to whatever is happening, which candidate they're going to support, notwithstanding whatever challenges that candidate has. And you see this thing happening, and that represents the change that is taking place in the world, where people's expectations, people's demands, people's anticipation of what is in their best interest is all changed to a now. I want it now. Yeah. You have to give it to me now. You have to give it to me and do it in a way where I could reasonably believe that it's going to happen in this term. And
so do you think then, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you here.
Yes, go on.
Do you think then that it would be imperative for us as a country to really move forward with our national development plan?
There is
that we can get everyone to buy into, to understand where we want to move the country and our people, as opposed to us just being so partisan? I'm just wondering.
But you are so right. But it means getting people to know that there is a national plan, getting them to buy into understanding it, and then they would know exactly what the country needs to do moving forward. I'll never forget the shocking experience I had. I flew to Jamaica to speak to the stock exchange in Jamaica, and a professor from the university asked me a question after my speech, saying, Minister, how do you account for the Bahamas falling so far behind Jamaica in ease of doing business? Mm-hmm. And Loretta, I had to catch myself. I say, my God, I did not have that statistic, the evidence of it, right? And so I just had to accept that what he said was right, and to say that Jamaica is just making a very special effort, okay? Knowing that the Bahamas was leading the way in ease of doing business, and Jamaica and every which way, and tourism, etc. I said the right thing, but I realized that the national plan was being developed by me then. I had this extraordinary lady in charge of it, we just hadn't reached a point where all of the statistics that should guide governments and guide the whole
decisions
country was available to me. Yeah. But it made me fully aware of how important it was. So I think you pressed your finger on the right button here, that the country has to develop a national plan. I noticed that they now put Felix Stubbs in charge of it. So it's a critical point. I always ask the lady who I appointed there, who now works for Life for Key.
Yes. Dr. Virgil.
Yeah. Okay.
An amazing woman. But when we look at it, persons like Sir Milo, persons like Sir Lyndon and those, they didn't have a roadmap to follow. They didn't have a committee that created a national plan. Sir Milo knew that he wanted equality and civil rights for all Bahamians. Sir Lyndon knew that he wanted to implement institutions that would be of longevity, that would benefit the Bahamian people. Those things we have established. Those things have been sustained. Now is the time. Christie put forward this national development plan. It's sat on the shelf now for about 10 years. collecting dust. In order for us as a country, this is a pivotal time, in my opinion, having observed 50 years as an independent country. This is a pivotal time for us to look at this closely and to ensure that we do something positive. I believe it would begin to be the identity of who we are, truly as a people, and yes, and also to create a roadmap as to where we're going.
Absolutely.
I think you're right, and I think you're doing an excellent job in raising that point now. And Loretta, let me just say that, clearly you are not finished with impacting public life in our country and impacting policy in our country. And I think you must see it as important for you. Youth is on your side, or age is on your side. I don't want to say youth, but that for you to continue to lift up, your voice so that it could impact positively policies moving forward. You have the experience. You've been in Parliament for many years. You have a grasp for public policy. And so I think, let me encourage you to, as someone who's much older, to continue this kind of program, but also independently of this program, to have a voice that could give you access to policymakers, and to help them and to influence them in making the right decisions. You must do that. I mean, just look at this young man here, for example. I remember when I had the opportunity for the first cellular license other than the one that's issued. And I remember talking to this young man, young Butler. I said to myself,
You were very proud of him.
Listen, what you mean? And when they went up, the bids went up to 65 million and people were dropping away and so forth, and they were going ahead. And I watched him grow, and really grow. And the country still does not really truly know and appreciate, the impact of Junior here and what he does and the impact he has and the command of business that he's engaged with.
Don't you think we make a good team?
Let's do this.
Listen. I'm a
private sector, public sector.
No, but you smile and make fun of it, but it is true. And your grandparents, the people of faith who believe that your grandparents would know what's happening. The faith we have in our Christian faith, believe that. But my point is, whether they know or they don't know, there's every reason for them to be very proud, of what you two have been able to achieve in life and to know that you've carried the name forward. There's nothing that is more important than a good name.
A good name.
Okay?
So, Mr. Christie, you serve as a 2-time prime minister now. I think about instances of Baha Mar and foreclosure. Give us a little insight of the weight, the burden that you carry as in the life of the prime minister. Certainly I know there's accolades of hugs and kisses when there's victory. Talk me through the life of those deep, dark moments when you were prime minister.
Baha Mar was a great test for me, for my government, and for the country. Sarkis Ismailian had a vision. He was his father, himself, they were investors here in the country. One day he came to me and invited me to walk with him behind the then Nassau Beach Hotel, out where there's a stream of pond. Mm-hmm. And as we stood there, he said, one day I'm going to build a hotel over there. And you're going to be able to come from a hill over there. And when you come up the hill, you're going to be suddenly confronted by this wonderful complex of hotels. It made me go then to a former client of mine who owned the complex out here, and to use every bit of strength that I had as a prime minister to get him to sell to Sarkis Ismailian. And he sold to Sarkis Ismailian. I was very, very disappointed because we worked very closely with Sarkis Ismailian. Hubert Ingram, during a period, worked very closely with him. When I came back into office and working with him, the challenges began. Mm-hmm. he had come to me to ask me if I could assist in raising a certain amount of money that was necessary. And I set about doing that with the China Export-Import Bank. And just when we had completed our arrangements for that, he came to my office with an attorney out of the United States to say that he had just filed for Chapter 11 in Delaware, bankruptcy.
Wow.
That was a stunning setback to me. I mean, because I was anticipating that I would open the crown jewel of investments. I would be here as Prime Minister to superintend that opening. But I had to move very quickly. And so I consulted my lawyers in London, my lawyers in Washington, and the lawyers here. And I had extraordinary work from Alison Gibson as Attorney General. And we then went about our way to challenge the ruling, to challenge the application in Delaware, and to argue that the jurisdiction for all of the cases should be here in the Bahamas.
Right.
And we succeeded. And this is where the current Chief Justice distinguished himself. He became the judge dealing with it, Justice Winder. We brought in Queen's Counsel at the time to deal with the matter. We had cases after cases after cases, and we got one in every area. In the meantime, I had added to my team Jerome Fitzgerald because of his expertise in business, and I wanted that judgment. I could not travel. The Chinese did not sanction prime ministers traveling without long notice of their goings, so I needed a team that could move back and forth. I owe Alison Gibson, Jerome Fitzgerald, and Sir Bolton Battle a great deal of gratitude. I would stay in my office late at night because of the difference in time.
Right.
All right, and I would be here 2 o'clock in the morning, talking to them on the phone, going through, making decisions. And ultimately, the negotiations moved here. And I remember one night, we decided to walk out on the negotiations. No one knows that.
Right.
I just decided, right? I wasn't getting what I wanted. I wasn't this and that and the other. And we walked out, but the next day, everybody came back together. And I must tell you that all of this was being done at the time where the politics was hard, harsh, and people were not believing anything I was saying, and I had to continue. And I wasn't able to campaign. Elections were coming, and I know I wasn't able to campaign. And then the chaps put half of BJ's area in my area. I never had the opportunity to campaign one day on that half on. So, long story short, we worked this, and I'll never forget when I called a meeting to announce the agreement. A couple of the Bahamian contractors, a couple of the people who worked for the Star, I got the Chinese, notwithstanding we found the right developer. That's now the current group. And I went back and forth to London negotiating that. Okay. We ultimately found the right developer, and they're now in place. We got every member of the staff. They got paid, notwithstanding the rules of bankruptcy. Everything that they earned, I got full pay for them through the China Export-Import Bank. Every Bahamian contractor, up to $500,000 debt, got everything they were owed, right? The others, we negotiated for them and to get them the rest of it, but 99% of the contractors were paid in full. Every Bahamian who had a concession in here, right? I got to protect their concession, okay? And so, for me, I came out with a wonderful result. And I'll never forget one day, Hubert Ingle asking me, he said, Christie, what would have happened if you didn't open Baha Mar?
Yep.
I wanted to say, what would have happened if you didn't campaign against me when you're opening it, But listen, that's how life is, right?
I was a part of that exciting period. And, the interesting thing is, I think it's a bit contemporary at this point for history to judge all of the decisions that were made. Maybe we need another decade, maybe a little bit more. Obviously, the end result is we do have this amazing property, and it all harkens right back to the original visionaire, Sarkis Esmerlian. And of course, the story of this is yet unfolding. But, you know, when Mr. Christie talks about those dark days, those dark nights, those long nights, you know, I was in opposition at that time to him, and I wasn't going to give him a moment, you know, in this regard. But, you know, if we can just shift gears, because, like I said, that is something that history, I think, is still out on with regards to decisions that were made, with regards to a lot of things. But also, as Prime Minister, there's a personal side to his life.
Absolutely.
And even though I spoke highly of his wife, you know, Mr. Christie has proven his total resilience in so many fronts.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had a stroke during his time of being
As
Prime Minister,
Yep.
and that would not have been an easy challenge. And what many people may or may not know is that he also elevated the cause of special needs children.
Absolutely.
Because of his own son, Adam, who is a special needs child and who he takes an awesome responsibility for
And
in
taking
caring
care of.
for personally. And so when you look at those things that he had to overcome while being Prime Minister of the Bahamas, I'd like for you to speak to us a little about that, because that is something that would have affected your private life.
Loretta, when Bernadette and I had Adam, and Adam was our youngest child, we were in denial as to whether or not he was mentally impaired. We just kept on looking for answers. And answers we were looking for that he was not going to be affected for the rest of his life, that there was some way he would be able to grow and recover. Okay? Like, I may have had attention deficit disorder when I was at Government High. That may explain why I couldn't pay attention in the classroom sufficiently, and I eventually grew out of it. So maybe I said, maybe that's what my son had. So it's something that you can grow out of, but we didn't do it. I didn't believe in that he was autistic, but ultimately we had to accept it. Okay? And then I realized that people who had this problem with their children, you never heard from them.
Yep.
And more I realized that people were hiding their
Very true.
children. And I said I was not going to do that, that Adam was going to become a public figure.
Yep.
And, you know, I did that here because I had this fundamental belief. Since I had that child, and I knew the difficulties that we had, we did not have, you know, when I asked if there was a speech therapist who could help Adam with speech, there were just 2 or 3 in the country.
Really?
If that. Ultimately, I decided I'll go to Cuba. And I'll ask the Cubans to sign a protocol with us to be able to provide special education teachers, because we needed to do that in our classrooms and get that these things. And so I went ahead and I did that, and Adam went to a school called Gabantines, a special education class there. And just to show you how desperate people are today, a lady just called me last week, a police officer, to say that her child was in Gerald Cash, but she wanted the child to go to Gabantines, and could I use my influence to help a child get into Gabantines? This effort of a country trying to catch up to provide the medicine, the facilities, to deal with special children. I never forgot, I made a speech in Trinidad, the Prime Minister's conference, and the then Prime Minister, female Prime Minister of Trinidad, came up to me afterwards and said, "I'm so glad that you said that every child deserves the right to participate in the equity of the country, and you spoke about your special child, and that the country must find a way to deal with special children, because there are parents who cannot afford the medicine or whatever." I told him about a woman who used to work for education who said Ministry of Education gave her permission to bring her daughter and lock up in a room in there while she do the work, because she couldn't leave the child home to be taken advantage of. One day I saw a woman walking with a child through the streets. I got out of my car and I spoke to her, and that helped to fashion in my head the need to do something to try and bring the country up to date with dealing with these issues that were just ignored.
Absolutely.
I appointed a committee with Lois Simonet, who's now deceased. She was an esteemed public servant. She did a wonderful report. It went on. We lost the election. It went on the bookshelves.
Yeah.
I came back in and I brought it back into being and whatnot. And by that time, other people were getting involved, and the autism group in the Bahamas was getting more proactive and whatnot. And again, pushing Adam. And one day, I took Adam to Government House. And the press must have asked him something, and he says, "I love my daddy." And that was the headlines. And you know why? I used to spend so much time with him, and you're so right that you have to. They have manifestations that they cannot control. You know, sometimes it's just rage. Sometimes it's sleepless nights. I remember many nights I couldn't sleep, and I would go into the office the next day as Prime Minister, and that was I had to do. And so many times I did that. We tried, you know, and so I made myself very comfortable with the knowledge that I'd entered into a protocol with special education teachers that were brought here. The government has carried it much further now. They have teachers in math and other things in Cuba. But I remember telling Condoleezza Rice, she was Secretary of State, that listen, no matter what your policy is with respect to Cuba, I need to access special education teachers and teachers to bring to the Bahamas. She says, we're not going to get into that. That's what you have to do as a country. You do it. All right. And so, again, you know, for me, I'll never forget two instances in my life. That one with Adam and the special arrangements we had to make for Adam and special school, and knowing that so many people out there couldn't. My great challenge was I dedicated 50 acres on Gladstone Road for that. I hired the architect who drew all the plans for a special facility, okay, for people to be able to have their children taken to a place where they could be managed, and then they'll be carried back to their homes. But it's wonderful, multi-purpose, multifaceted
But
place.
also to give relief also to the caregivers as well. I think that was a part of that project.
But it never happened.
No.
And so I lost the election. And
But we must do that in our national development,
it never happened.
because we must make sure that
I'm
no
told-
children
yeah.
are left behind, no citizens are left
we
behind.
need to do that for our children.
I have a question for you, though,
Yeah.
as we wind up. In all of your political life, what would have been the highlight, in your opinion, of your political career? And if you had the opportunity to go back and make one change, what would that be?
Well, it's difficult to find a highlight because, you know, you had so many successes. But I think the greatest impact for me was in 2007. I won in 2002. And in 2000, the following election, the economy was banging along and whatnot. And I lost it. And that impact then got me to understand that I had better try to find out what it is that motivates people to vote for you or for the other side. All right? And so that was a defining moment for me where I had succeeded, I thought, magnificently to get the economy going in the right direction and whatnot, but I was not rewarded for it. Okay? Come back to Baha Mar. There's no achievement like the one that I got at Baha Mar. You know, I had a great feel for urban renewal and what I did with urban renewal because I created that based on the conditions I found in the country. One day I went up on Fortune Castle and I met a woman whose son was imprisoned. The mother had died for 3 children. The mother had died because she had AIDS. When I asked her where was the toilet, they had no toilet in the house.
Wow.
When I said, well, where's the toilet outside? No toilet outside.
Wow.
And I realized here was this woman who then was professing to be a woman of God because she was praying and that sort of stuff. and all of a sudden, no kind of health facilities and whatnot. And I went down and called Paul Fackerson, and I said, listen, his assistant then was the current Minister for Immigration, Bell.
Yeah, Keith Bell.
And I said, I want to form an urban renewal. I said, I want to do this based on the police could direct, and if the police say clean this lot, they have to clean it. Move this car, they have the car. So I want to integrate the police into this. And I want to be able to have a microscopic examination of what's happening in homes in the inner city. So children who can't eat, whether they're going to school hungry. And so a lot of policies were given birth out of urban renewal. And then plus children, my mommy tried to get me to learn the piano, the saxophone, everything and whatnot. But I look at the children with these gifts. Yeah. And we had hundreds of children learning music and whatnot. And to see how my successors came in and just threw it away and abandoned it, the opportunities that we were giving for children and so forth. And so my moment was, I must tell you that to bring about Baha Mar, and knowing that the people would take 5 or 6 years to know what role I played in bringing them and how meaningful it was. And I could tell you the first 2-3 years after I did it, and I was in private, I walked in here and nobody knew me. Yeah. And then suddenly they realized that I was someone who played a meaningful role in making this happen. And you saw the appreciation. You'd go into restaurants and they would tell you and so forth. And so, I think this was a great achievement on my part, because not only we had to weather the legal storm, we had to go up against someone whose original vision, was this and whatnot. But I believed at the time that if I did not do the things I did, this would still be in liquidation, being fought over. Yeah. And so this was, to me, heralded as one of the crown jewels of my achievements in public life.
Fair enough.
That it exists, thousands of people are employed. And Loretta, I look back at a moment when, so many moments that I had this whole challenge of faith, over Adam. I said, I asked myself, God, why do you create imperfect children? Mm. Why do you give imperfect children to people who can't afford to keep them? God, why do you take a woman? I remember when one of my friend's wives died, she was 41, 2 little children left behind. I said, God, why? I went to the church and spoke at the funeral and had a conversation with God. Why do you do this? Who are you sending a message to? So in our lives, I won't be able to end as I started. When Sir Lyndon Pinling made his first choice as a cabinet minister, his portfolios, it wasn't Curtis Macmillan who was the Minister of Health, who was a doctor, or dentist. It was Sir Milo Butler.
That's right. And that was his first portfolio.
And you know why? Because there was nothing more meaningful on addressing the health of a nation. The health of the nation is the wealth of the nation, and to put the symbol there, because that's what it was all about.
Right.
The one who symbolized being able to reach down and pull up and help. And there's nothing more powerful than health care in a country. And, for someone like myself who had a stroke and had to come back from that stroke, all of the challenges of faith, I knew then, that there was somebody, and that somebody had to be the God.
Amen.
Who was able to come into my life and say, your role is not finished.
Yep.
I remember the doctors asking me, we have to go to the public, they say, to say to them whether there's full recovery. And I asked them if they had a Bible. Said yes. And Dr. Charles Ramming was my neurologist, and he and Conwell Brown and Perry Gomez was in the room. I said, turn to Ephesians chapter 6. And then I recited, put on the full armor of God, so when the day of testing comes, you're able to stand your ground. I went on to all the verses and whatnot, and they said, you're going to have full recovery. And they went out and told the Bahamian people that.
We have had a fascinating time with you today. You have opened up and shared so much. Yep. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about you, but I've learned even more. And I think the Bahamian people are going to appreciate this very, very much. But as we get ready to close this out today, what would you like to be remembered for?
That I did my best and that I served Loretta. What is wonderful to go in public life, to spend the time I spent in public life, and no one could say I pulled a deal,
Yeah.
that I ever pulled a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, and that to me is so important, that I've come out of a public life, and people could still look at me and said, he came out if he went in. Okay, and my son said he could have thrown the rock at the television, I'd be getting there bragging, but I don't want to share in a company. And he said, I should have had some shares in some company to give them something, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but I just, this is how I conducted myself. And I think in public life, right, you have to try your best not to be seen to be benefiting
Yep.
from public life, because people will may draw the conclusion, that's why you went into it, all right, to use it for your own personal benefit. And they can't say that about me, I don't think, or if they say it, it can't stick.
So does that go back to what we said earlier about a good name?
Yes, there's no question about it.
So the one thing that you would like to have us remember you for is your ethics and your good name?
Yes, no question about that. And I hope that my children and their children will ever be pleased with the fact that as someone who was the patriarch of their family, okay, because I inherited from my father, okay, so that we did the best we could to give them the best life we could, okay, and they took advantage of it, and I'm well pleased.
Well, our grandfather always reminded us of the goodly heritage.
Yes.
He was never concerned about the trappings of wealth, even though he was able to create a lot. We were never taught to like things. Yeah. We were taught to appreciate people.
That's for sure.
And so I think that as we wrap up, obviously we see parallels there, and we love that because, as you stated, and as Granddaddy always taught us, a goodly heritage is one that we should be proud of.
Yep.
No
Mr.
question.
Christie, Loretta, thank you both so much. Mr. Christie, I don't know if many of our guests have ever heard these stories that, they see the public figure, but they don't see the man who suffers, who has to take compromise in managing a special needs son who's been through so much even while in public life, whether it's been health or struggles of the office. And I think that is one of the fascinating things about this podcast. We get to hear so many stories that we hope inspires our guests who are watching this podcast, because we don't do this because we have nothing else to do. We do this really because we want to inspire young people to look at the legacies of Somilo, people like you, Honorable Perry Christie, third Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to recognize that nothing is given. All of us have to make a sacrifice if we are going to be somebody, if we're going to go somewhere. And so I really want to invite our guests and thank them for watching this podcast. And as we thank our guests, I want to thank our sponsors, the Echo at Baha Mar, for this wonderful facility that they allow us to use for each one of these podcasts. We want to thank the Butler Legacy Foundation for continuing to support this wonderful initiative. We hope that your investments is impacting lives as Somilo has impacted so many lives. And so we're grateful, Mr. Christie, for you joining us today. And we look forward to more of our guests in the next episode of the Butler Legacy Podcast. And how could I wrap up my wonderful Loretta, my favoriteest cousin,
I love it.
without thanking you for helping me lead this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
You just glow every time I see you. Your eyes sparkle, this dress. I mean, my God, you really make the Butler name, a good one.
The good thing we wanted to
I
thank
can
you.
tell you this, I knew your parents and I knew Loretta's parents, and both sets of parents should be very proud of their children. And you two have done a magnificent job here today. I'm very pleased about what you do, and continue to do that work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christie, and thank you also, Franklyn. And the one thing I'm taking away from this today is that in the midst of adversity, we can still build legacies.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much, Mr. Christie, for demonstrating and sharing that. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Don't worry. We're friends.
Yes.
That's a wrap. Thank you all very much.